Okay, so last week on Monday, we went through all these definitions we have right here. So make sure that if you don't have these in your notes, you go online and get that copy down in there. And now today, we need to go through these 3 properties, 2 for a rhombus and then 1 for a rectangle. Remember, all 3 of these properties will also apply for a square, since square is a rhombus and a rectangle. So a parallelogram is a rhombus if and only if its diagonals are perpendicular. And in our example below, ABCD is a rhombus if and only if the diagonal AC is perpendicular to the diagonal BD. Okay, and so the next property we have for a rhombus, parallelogram is a rhombus if and only if each diagonal bisects a pair of opposite angles. So ABCD is a rhombus if and only if the diagonal AC bisects angle DAB and angle BCD. And the other diagonal BD, is going to bisect angle ABC and angle ABC and CDA. So a rhombus's diagonals are going to bisect the angles. So those 2 little angles right here are going to be equal. 2 angles there equal. And then once again on the other angles over here, the 2 little ones are equal. And our last one here is for a rectangle. A rectangle or a parallelogram is a rectangle if and only if its diagonals are congruent. So in this example down below, ABCD is a rectangle if and only if AC is congruent to BD. And remember these if and only if parts of these properties. Remember that means it goes both ways. So if you have a shape like that looks like a rectangle and its diagonals are given to you as congruent, we know that has to be a rectangle. Same thing for the other 2. If you have this property to begin with, then you know it has to be that shape. So if it just gives you a 4-sided shape that has that property, you know which shape it is after that. And now our examples, we're going to classify these 6 parallelograms. I'll do the first one together, and then you guys are going to pause the video and do the next ones on your own. I feel like we're more than well equipped to do this. It's not too terribly difficult. So in the first one there, we look at these marks here. It shows that the diagonals bisect each other. But that doesn't really help us identify which kind of parallelogram it is, because all parallelograms have the diagonals bisecting each other. The key marking on this shape is this right angle here. So that tells us that the diagonals are perpendicular. And so from the last page, we see that the property that has that means that this shape is a rhombus. So since the diagonals are perpendicular, we know that this shape is a rhombus. So go ahead, and this is where you should pause the video and go through the next 5 here and do them on your own. And then
students, time now 2:35. All students should be the teacher, sponsor, or coach. If you're waiting for a ride, please wait by the north doors. Thank you and have a great day.
I hope all those announcements made it in here. That was fun. But now at this point, you should have done the other 5, and now I'm going to go through them myself to make sure you guys have the correct answers. Okay, so on that first one there, we already know it's a parallelogram because the direction said so. So we know the opposite sides are congruent. So since these two sides were congruent and their opposite sides are congruent, that makes all sides congruent, and so it's a rhombus. Then on C, we have one right angle, and so since it's a parallelogram, the opposite angle is going to be congruent, and then consecutive angles are going to add up to 180. So we know that one's going to end up being a right angle, and then its opposite angle is going to be congruent. So that's a right angle, which makes it a rectangle. And then D, we have one right angle, so we have four right angles in a parallelogram, just like the last example. And just like the example before it, opposite sides are congruent. And so since the first two given were congruent, all sides are congruent now. So since it's a regular parallelogram, we know it's going to be a square. And then on E, it's telling us that the diagonals are congruent, which is a property of a rectangle from the last page there. And then the last one, we have two pieces of information they give us. The diagonals are congruent, which would make it a rectangle, but also the diagonals are perpendicular, which would make it a rhombus. So since it's a rectangle and a rhombus, we know this shape has to be a square. And then our last two examples are going to be a little bit of computation. So it first says to classify the special quadrilateral and then find the values of x and y. So first we're going to classify this shape. So look at the hash marks there. It shows us that all the sides are congruent, so we know it's a rhombus because that's the definition of a rhombus. And so since we have a rhombus and all sides are equal, we can find x by setting up 8x equal to 5x plus 6, since those are the two values they give us for congruent sides. Move the x's over to one side by subtracting the 5x. So 3x is equal to 6. Divide by 2. Don't divide by 2. Divide by 3, and the answer is 2. X is equal to 2. Now we have to find y. And we don't have the angles are all equal, but we still have a parallelogram. So these two angles are consecutive angles, so they still have to add up to 180 degrees. It's 97 plus 12y minus 1 equals 180. So subtract the 97 to the other side. We should have 12y minus 1 equals 83. Add 1 to both sides. 12y is equal to 84, so y is 7. Now go ahead, take this time, pause the video, and try B on your own. There'll be a you try, and then hopefully you've done that problem and you guys had much success doing it, and you've done it, and now we're going to go over it. So first we're going to classify the shape. We have 4 right angles, and we have 4 congruent sides, so we know this has to be a square. It already kind of looks like a square, but once again, you can't just assume a picture is drawn accurately, so you have to rely on the markings they give you. So we know that all the sides are going to be equal, so we can set those two sides equal to each other. 2x plus 1 equals to 4x minus 7. And then I'm going to combine all my stuff together. So I'm going to move the 2x over to this side, and I'm going to move that 7 over to that side. So we should have 8 on the left equals 2x on the right. So x is equal to 4. Then last, we got that business with the angles there. It only marks that little angle here. But one of our properties of rhombuses were that the diagonals bisect the angles. So since the square is a rhombus, we can use that property. So this angle is being bisected by that diagonal. So 7y plus 3 is equal to half of that right angle. So it's equal to 45. And then we just have another two-step equation. We'll subtract the 3 to the other side. 7y is equal to 42. Divide by 7. And y is equal to 6. And that does it for our notes here. So for the rest of the hour, you guys have an 8-4 assignment from the book. And that's assignment 5 on your assignment sheet. And there's also going to be a review sheet for you guys. So make sure you go over that so we can have that ready to go to start reviewing on Tuesday. So the 8-4 assignment we're going to grade tomorrow, and then we're just going to go over the review tomorrow as well. So make sure you have both of those done for tomorrow. And if you have any questions over everything, we can answer those tomorrow. And we will be quizzing on Thursday over these first 4.